The night was colder than death. The wind howled across the barren land like a hungry beast, shaking the wooden walls of the small house. Snow fell endlessly, covering the world in white silence. Inside the lonely house, a single human sat by the fire. His name was Daniel. His hands were rough, his eyes heavy with old pain. He had chosen this frozen world to live far away from others, far away from memories that still burned inside him. The fire cracked, but the warmth was thin. Daniel pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders and closed his eyes. But before sleep could take him, a sharp sound echoed through the night. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel opened his eyes, frowning. Who would come to his door in such a storm? No one ever visited him. No one dared to. Slowly he stood, his boots heavy on the floor, and walked to the door. When he opened it, the wind roared inside, carrying with it two shadows. A woman stood there, her body shaking from the cold. Her skin had a pale silver tone, her eyes large and glowing faintly in the dark. She was not human. Beside her, a young girl, maybe 12 years old, clung to her arm. The girl's lips were blue, her small frame trembling. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice broken like glass. "My daughter, she is freezing. She cannot last the night." Daniel looked at them, his heart tightening. The girl's eyes were half closed, her breath thin. The mother held out her hand, shaking. And then, in a voice filled with shame, she said words that struck him like a knife. "Just one night with me. In return for a blanket, please save her." Daniel froze. The storm outside seemed to go silent for a moment, as if the whole world waited for his answer. The mother's eyes did not meet his. Her face was filled with fear, shame, and desperation. She was ready to sell herself for the life of her child. He could not move. In his mind, memories came rushing back. Memories of another night long ago when his own wife had begged for help. And no one came. He had buried them both, wife and child, under cold earth. Since that day, he had carried nothing but silence and pain. Now, standing before him was a mirror of his past. A mother and child dying in the cold. Daniel's hand tightened on the doorframe. His voice came out low but strong. "No." The woman flinched, pulling her daughter closer as if preparing for him to shut the door. Tears filled her glowing eyes. But Daniel's next words shocked her. "No, not like that. Both of you come inside." The woman's head jerked up, her eyes wide. "What? Inside?" Daniel repeated firmly. Now she hesitated, confused. She had expected cruelty. She had expected the hunger of a man who lived alone. But she saw none of that in his eyes. His gaze was hard, but not with lust, hard with something else. Pain, memory, duty. Slowly she stepped inside, guiding her daughter. Daniel shut the door quickly, pushing back the wind. He grabbed another blanket from the shelf and wrapped it around the girl's small body. She whimpered but leaned into the warmth. Daniel lifted her gently, placing her near the fire. The flames painted her face in gold light. The mother stared, unable to believe. You don't want anything?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her, his jaw set. "I want the girl to live. That's all." The woman felt her knees weaken. She had begged strangers before, but no one had ever shown mercy without a price. She sank to the floor, tears rolling down her silver cheeks. Daniel said nothing more. He poured hot water into a small cup and handed it to her. "Drink, you both need strength." The girl slowly sipped, her eyes opening wider. The mother watched her child breathe easier, her small hands warming by the fire. For the first time in months, hope flickered inside her. But as the fire burned and silence filled the room, Daniel's face remained in shadow. He stared into the flames as if seeing something far away, something only he could feel. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the little house, 3 lives had crossed paths. The mother whispered thanks, but in her heart she wondered, who is this human and why would he help strangers for nothing? And in the darkness outside, unseen eyes watched the house. A shadow stood far on the frozen hill, staring at the glowing window. The visitor's presence was silent but dangerous. The night was not done. The real story was only beginning. The fire burned bright, but the room still felt cold with silence. The alien mother sat close to her daughter, wrapping the blanket tighter around the child's thin frame. The girl's breathing grew steady, her cheeks slowly turning from blue to pale pink. Relief softened the mother's face, but her eyes kept shifting toward the human. Daniel sat across from them, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze lost in the flames. He had said little since letting them inside, His rough face carried lines not from age alone but from years of sorrow and battles unseen. His silence was heavier than the storm outside. The mother's hands trembled. She wanted to speak, but fear held her back. Finally, she whispered, her voice breaking the quiet. Why did you take us in?" Daniel didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the fire. For a moment, she thought he hadn't heard. Then he spoke, his voice low. "No child should freeze to death. Not while I'm breathing." The mother looked at him, stunned. She had expected hunger, cruelty, or indifference. Not this, her daughter stirred, eyes half open. The girl studied Daniel with curiosity. In her short life, humans had been nothing more than stories whispered in the dark, stories of war, destruction, and greed. But this man didn't look like the monster she'd imagined. His eyes were tired, yes, but not cruel. The mother pulled her daughter closer. "Rest, child. Just rest," she murmured. Daniel rose suddenly, his boots scraping the floor. The mother flinched, expecting him to show his true nature. Instead, he walked to a shelf, pulled down another blanket, and draped it gently over the girl. He then poured hot water into a small bowl, soaking a cloth and placing it on the girl's forehead. The mother's lips parted, but no words came. This was not what she understood of humans. This was not what the world had taught her, but still doubt gnawed at her heart. Hours passed. The storm outside roared like a wild beast, but inside the small house became a fragile island of warmth. The mother leaned against the wall, exhaustion pressing her down. Yet her eyes never fully closed. She watched the human move, feeding the fire, checking on the girl, pacing the room like a soldier on guard. The daughter whispered softly, her voice weak but clear. "Mama, is he going to hurt us?" The mother froze, her heart twisting. She looked at Daniel, who was staring out the window at the swirling snow. His shoulders were broad, his arms scarred. He looked like a fighter, a man who had seen too much. "No," the mother whispered back, though she wasn't sure if she believed her own words. "He saved you." The girl's eyes drifted shut again, but not in fear, this time in comfort. Daniel turned then, as if he had heard the quiet exchange. His eyes locked with the mother's, and for a long moment they said nothing. His gaze was steady, but behind it was something she couldn't name. Was it sorrow? Was it anger? Or something far older? She broke eye contact, looking down. Her heart pounded. Later that night, Daniel sat by the window, staring into the storm. The mother gathered courage and asked again, "Who are you, human?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he muttered, "Just a man trying to keep the fire burning." But when the lightning flashed outside, she saw his face clearly, and the long scar running from his temple down to his jaw. It was not the scar of an accident. It was the mark of battle. The mother felt a shiver. What kind of man was this? Why did he hide in such a frozen land? Her questions only grew when she noticed something else. A long, dark shape leaned against the wall near his bed. A weapon. Old, heavy, but cared for. She looked away quickly, pretending not to see. But inside, her mind raced. As the night deepened, the house grew still. The girl slept soundly for the first time in many months. The mother's eyes began to close, but unease clung to her chest. Just before sleep took her, she thought she heard something. Crunch. Snow shifting outside. Her eyes snapped open. She turned toward the window, but Daniel was already there, his body rigid, hand hovering near the weapon. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He only listened. The sound faded. Silence returned. But the mother knew then. Someone or something was out there watching. Daniel stepped back from the window, his face unreadable. He looked at the mother, then at her daughter, sleeping peacefully. His voice was rough when he spoke. "You'll be safe tonight. I'll make sure of it." The mother swallowed hard. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust. But in her heart, two truths clashed. This human had shown them kindness. Yet danger clung to him like a shadow, and outside unseen eyes still lingered in the storm. The fire cracked once more, filling the silence. In that strange home between fear and hope, 3 lives sat under the same roof. The girl slept, the mother prayed, and the human watched the darkness like an old soldier waiting for war. The night was far from over. The night was heavy, darker than usual. Clouds smothered the moon, leaving the world in a suffocating black. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, its orange glow barely pushing back the shadows. Daniel sat at the window, weapon close at hand, his eyes scanning the tree line. He had felt it all day, The air too still, the forest too quiet. Danger was coming. He could almost taste it in the wind. The mother clutched her daughter on the bed, whispering a soft lullaby in her own tongue. But her voice shook. She too felt it, that strange weight pressing against the walls as though the dark itself was waiting to break in. Suddenly a sound split the silence. Crunch, snow under boots. Not one pair, many. Daniel's jaw tightened. He rose in one smooth motion, gripping the weapon. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with warning. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't move. The mother froze, pulling her daughter close. The girl's eyes widened, fear glowing in them like a trapped star. Bang! The door rattled as something struck it from outside. Then a harsh voice shouted through the night. Human, we know you're in there. Hand over the aliens and we'll let you live. The mother's breath caught. Her daughter buried her face in her chest. Daniel stepped closer to the door, his voice cold as steel. You'll get nothing. Laughter echoed from outside, cruel and mocking. Brave words, but you can't fight us all. The door shook again, harder this time. Daniel planted his feet, weapon ready. His heart pounded, but his face stayed calm, the face of a man who had stood against death before. The first strike came fast. A window shattered, shards of glass raining onto the floor. A man climbed through, a knife glinting in his hand. Before he could take another step, Daniel moved. The weapon roared once, thunder filling the cabin. The attacker fell lifeless, his body sprawled across the floorboards. The girl screamed, clutching her mother tighter. The mother's eyes filled with terror, not at the dead man, but at the human standing like a wall between them and the night. He was no longer just Daniel. He was a soldier again. More voices shouted outside. More boots crunched against the snow. They swarmed the cabin, banging on the walls, trying to break the door. Daniel's voice cut through the chaos. Stay low. He fired again, the crack of the weapon echoing through the frozen valley. Another man fell, silenced forever. The attackers hesitated now, their laughter gone, replaced by rage and fear. He's only one man, one shouted. Take him! Daniel's eyes narrowed. His hands moved fast, reloading with a calm born from years of battle. His body remembered what his soul wanted to forget. He had fought before. He could fight again. The mother held her daughter tight, heart pounding. She could barely breathe. Each shot echoed inside her chest. Each scream outside reminded her of the danger they had brought to this man's door. But when she looked at him, standing tall against the storm of violence, she saw something she hadn't expected. Choice. He didn't have to protect them. He could have given them up. But he hadn't, and now he was willing to fight an army for two strangers. The battle raged. Shadows moved outside, throwing rocks, smashing against the door. Daniel fired, ducked, moved with precision. The floor was littered with broken glass and smoke. The cabin shook, but it still stood. Finally, silence fell. Only the fire crackled, and the sound of snow shifting under retreating boots filled the air. Daniel lowered his weapon slowly, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His face was hard, but his eyes were tired. He had won. For now. The mother looked at him with wide eyes, torn between fear and gratitude. She whispered, You risked your life. For us. Daniel turned toward her, his face unreadable. They weren't after me. They were after you. I don't stand by while cowards hunt women and children. The mother's throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. The girl peeked from her mother's arms, her voice small but clear. You're not like the stories. Daniel looked at her, and for a moment his hard expression softened. Stories are just words. What matters is what you do. Outside, the snow was stained with shadows of the fallen. But further down the valley, more figures gathered in the dark. The men who had fled were not finished. They would return with more and with fury. Inside the cabin, the fire flickered weakly. The mother held her daughter close, her eyes locked on the man who had just stood against death itself. For the first time, she wondered if this human's past was not just filled with scars, but with something greater. Strength, honor, and a will no storm could break. But the night was not over. The attack was only the beginning. The cabin smelled of smoke and blood. Shattered glass glittered across the floor, and the fire hissed as sparks rose into the air. Daniel stood at the window, weapon still warm in his hands, his face set like stone. The mother clutched her daughter in silence, her heart racing from the violence she had just witnessed. Outside, the night was not quiet. Faint voices drifted on the wind. The attackers had not given up. They were gathering again, their anger louder than the storm. Daniel reloaded with quick, practiced movements. His eyes never left the tree line. His voice came low, steady, carrying a weight that silenced the room. They'll be back. More of them, stronger. The mother swallowed hard. How can you fight them all? Daniel didn't look at her. I've fought worse. The girl peeked out from the blanket, her eyes wide. You're not afraid? For the first time, Daniel turned his head toward her. His gaze was sharp, but there was something softer beneath it. Fear never leaves. You just learn to carry it. The mother saw the truth in his eyes. He had carried it for years, and it had carved scars deeper than any blade. The crunch of snow grew louder. Shadows moved at the edge of the woods, torches flaring in the dark. The cabin glowed like a beacon, surrounded on all sides. One voice called out, harsh and cruel, "Human! You've killed our men. Now we'll burn your home and take what's ours." The girl whimpered, burying her face in her mother's arms. The mother's chest ached with guilt. She whispered, "This is because of us." But Daniel's reply was sharp, almost cutting. "No, this is because of them. And I don't run from men like that." The first torch flew. It struck the wall, flames licking at the wood. The mother gasped, clutching her daughter tighter. Daniel moved swiftly, kicking snow against the fire, stamping it out before it spread. Another torch came, then another. "They want to smoke us out," he muttered. Then, with sudden resolve, he turned to the mother. "Take her to the back. If the walls fall, keep low. Don't open the door unless I tell you." The mother hesitated. "And you?" Daniel's voice was firm. "I'll hold the front." The attackers rushed from the trees. Dark shapes with blades, clubs, and fire. They howled as they charged the cabin. Daniel braced himself at the doorway. The first man crashed through, swinging wildly. Daniel met him with the butt of his weapon, knocking him flat. Another lunged, but Daniel's shot rang out and the man crumpled to the floor. The cabin shook with chaos. Wood splintered, glass shattered, screams filled the air. Daniel fought like a storm-given flesh, calm, controlled, deadly. Every move was precise, every strike purposeful. He was no simple man. He was a soldier forged by war. The mother watched from the back, trembling. Her daughter clung to her arm, whispering, "He's not just protecting us. He's fighting like he has something to prove." And she was right. With every shot, every swing, Daniel's face revealed not just anger, but grief. His eyes were filled with ghosts. When the last man fell, silence returned, broken only by the girl's quiet sobs and the crackle of the fire. Daniel stood in the doorway, his chest heaving, his weapon heavy in his hands. Blood stained the snow outside. The mother rose slowly, her voice shaking. Why do this for us? You could have let them take us. No one would have blamed you." Daniel turned, his face shadowed by the firelight. His voice was rough, carrying years of pain. "Because once, they came for my family, and no one stood in the way." The mother's breath caught. She stared at him, seeing the man behind the scars. "My wife begged for help." Daniel continued, his voice breaking. "My little girl cried in the cold, but no one opened their door. I buried them both with my own hands. And I swore never again. Not if I could stop it." The mother's eyes filled with tears. Her daughter, too young to understand the full weight, whispered softly, "So now you save others, because no one saved you." Daniel looked at her, and for a moment his hard mask cracked. Pain, love, and sorrow shone through. He nodded once, his throat too tight for words. Outside, the snow was red with blood. The attackers were gone, but the threat was not over. Word would spread. More would come. The mother stepped closer, her voice trembling but strong. "You carry your scars like chains. But tonight, you gave us life. You gave us hope." Daniel looked at her, the firelight flickering in his tired eyes. "Hope won't keep you safe. But maybe it's a start." He turned back to the window, watching the dark woods where shadows still moved. His secret was no longer hidden. He was not just a man in exile. He was a soldier haunted by loss, now standing between two fragile lives and the storm outside, and the storm was not done. The night faded slowly, its darkness peeling away to reveal the first pale light of dawn. Snow covered the ground in a thick blanket, soft and quiet, but the silence was not peaceful. Outside the cabin, the white was stained red where bodies lay still. The battle had ended, yet the air still carried the smell of smoke, blood, and fear. Inside, the fire burned low, glowing weakly in the hearth. Daniel stood by the doorway, his body stiff, his weapon hanging loosely in his hand. His breath came heavy, fogging the cold air that slipped through the broken windows. His eyes were sharp, searching the horizon, but behind them was exhaustion. Deep, bone-heavy exhaustion. The mother watched him from across the room. She held her daughter close, stroking the girl's hair as she slept, safe for the moment. The mother's own body trembled, not just from the cold, but from everything she had witnessed. She finally whispered, "It is over, isn't it?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "For now. But word will spread. They'll come again, stronger." Her chest tightened. She had known safety was an illusion, but hearing it aloud crushed her hope. She looked at him, her voice breaking. "Then why fight for us? Why carry our burden?" Daniel turned his gaze from the snow to her eyes. For the first time, his voice was soft. "Because if I don't, no one will." The girl stirred awake. She blinked at the morning light slipping through the cracks in the wall. Her small hands reached out toward the fire. When she saw Daniel standing at the door, she smiled faintly. "You're still here," she said sleepily. Daniel almost smiled back, but the weight of his past kept his lips straight. "I told you I'd keep watch." The girl tilted her head. "Then you're our guardian." The word struck him harder than any blade. Guardian. The word he once had prayed someone else would be for his own family. His chest tightened, but he said nothing. By midday, whispers reached the village. The human had fought off a dozen men alone. Some scoffed, saying it was impossible. Others swore it was true. The story spread fast. Carried on cold winds. He protects them. He killed for them. Maybe he is not like other humans. Or maybe he is more dangerous. The village divided in thought, fear on one side, curiosity on the other, but all agreed on one thing. The human's cabin was no longer just a lonely house. It was a spark, and sparks could ignite flames. Back in the cabin, Daniel patched the broken wall with wooden planks, his movements steady despite his bruised body. The mother watched him work, torn between gratitude and unease. Finally, she spoke. "You can send us away. If we stay, we only bring danger." Daniel paused, hammer in hand. His back stiffened. Slowly, he turned to face her. His eyes burned with something fierce. "You think I saved you just to throw you back to the wolves?" She lowered her gaze, ashamed. His voice softened, carrying pain and resolve in equal measure. "You and your daughter have a home here. If you want it. No one should be left out in the cold." Not again. The mother's breath caught. No one had ever offered her a home. For so long, she had been nothing but a shadow, begging for scraps. And now this scarred human, haunted by his own ghosts, was offering her something she thought was lost forever. Safety. The girl ran up then, her face bright despite the bruises of hunger and cold. She hugged Daniel's leg without hesitation. "We'll stay, please, we'll stay with you." Daniel looked down at her, frozen. Slowly, his hand rested on her small head. His chest ached, but for the first time in years, warmth spread through it, something fragile, something almost like hope. That night, the fire burned stronger. The mother cooked with what little food they had, filling the cabin with the smell of warm stew. The girl laughed softly as she ate, her joy echoing like music in the small room. Daniel sat quietly watching them. His scars were still there, his grief still sharp. But in their laughter, he felt something he thought had died long ago, a reason. Outside, far beyond the trees, other eyes watched. Word of the human who defied bandits and sheltered outsiders was spreading across the frozen lands. Some saw him as a threat, others as a symbol. And in the distance, forces greater than the village stirred. The galaxy was wide and stories traveled faster than light. Soon, many would hear of the human who had chosen mercy over cruelty, fire over cold. But for now, inside the small cabin, 3 souls shared warmth where once there had been only silence. For the mother and daughter, it was the beginning of a new life. For Daniel, it was the start of something he thought he could never have again. A new beginning, built not on war but on the fragile hope of family.